How's it going, everyone? It's Ling here. I'm back with another Commander deck tech video. This is another one of my personal decks that I like to call Play Forests, Make Tokens, Repeat. It's a mono green landfall deck featuring Titania, Nature's Force as the commander. Just like in my other videos, I'll go through the strategy and the cards for the deck first and then end with a quick goldfishing session. I'll also put a Moxfield link with the full deck list in the description below. Titania, Nature's Force is a mono green commander costing 4 generic and 2 green. She is a 6/6 legendary elemental that allows you to play forest from your graveyard, has a pseudo landfall ability that creates a 5/3 elemental when a forest enters under your control, and allows you to mill 3 cards when an elemental you control dies. The goal of this deck is to put a bunch of forests into play, to make a bunch of tokens with Titania, and then swing in for the win. This deck does not contain any game changers, and I would say it belongs in bracket 3. Rating the power level out of 10 relative to the decks I own, I would give this either a 7 or 8 out of 10. Now, getting into the strategy. Since this is essentially a landfall deck, we have plenty of cards that synergizes with lands. Avenger of Zendikar, Rampaging Baloths, and Scoot Swarm are landfall all-stars that help you create even more tokens to attack with. Tireless Provisioner and Lotus Cobra have landfall abilities that create a treasure or floating mana, while Spelunking is essentially an explorer staple to an enchantment that lets your land enter untapped. These 3 cards are must-haves for this deck because they synergize so well with many of the land ramp spells in the deck and can give you huge turns. Next, we have Ancient Green Warden and Traveling Chocobo to trigger land ETB abilities in additional time, while also having relevant additional abilities that allow you to play lands from your graveyard or your top deck. Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Loot Exuberant Explorer, and Wayward Swordtooth are included to let you play an additional land on each of your turns. Oracle of Maldaya lets you play an additional land on each of your turns and also play lands from your top deck. Augur of Autumn also lets you play lands from your top deck, and if you have Coven, you can also play creatures from your top deck. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, has an ability that makes all of your non-token creatures into forests, in addition to their other types so that they can trigger the commander and landfall effects on ETB. Titania, Protector of Argoth, helps recur a single land from your graveyard into play on ETB, and also creates a 5/3 elemental whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from play. Speaking of putting lands into your graveyard from play, we have Zern Orb, which allows you to sack a land to gain 2 life. Zern Orb is a must-have for this deck because it synergizes so well with the Titania I just mentioned, as well as the Commander Titania, and also some recursion spells that I'll mention later. Next on the docket, we have lots and lots of ramp. Starting off, we have Arbor Elf, Elvish Mystic, and Llanowar Elves, some of the best 1-mana dorks. And then we have Wild Growth, Utopia Sprawl, and Soul Ring. All of these 1-mana ramp spells are great at giving you a head start, but I didn't want to include too many because land ramp spells are much more impactful for this deck. Glimpse the Core, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, and Sakura Tribe Elder are cheap spells that ramp a single land into play. Topiary Stomper and Wood Elves are creatures that ramp a single land into play on ETB, while Lumbering Whirlwagon is a vehicle that ramps a land into play on ETP or attack. Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, and Flare of Cultivation are all spells that let you ramp 1 land into play while putting another into your hand. Nissa's Pilgrimage and Bloomvine Regent's Omenside are pretty much the same, except it only allows you to get basic forests, which is not a problem for this mono green deck. Springbloom Druid and Larval Scoutlander are permanents that can ramp 2 lands into play at the cost of sacrificing a land you control. Harrow and Rolling Regrowth are instants that can ramp 2 lands into play at the cost of sacrificing a land you control. Entish Restoration is an instant that does the same thing, but better because it can ramp up to 3 lands into play if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. These 3 cards are must-haves for this deck because they synergize so well with the landfall abilities, plus with Titania's ability, sacking a forest isn't much of a downside because you can just play them again from your graveyard. Lastly, we have the top-end ramp spells with Open the Way and Traverse the Outlands, which can put an impressive amount of lands into play. Nissa, Who Shakes the World, is also included to give your forest the ability to tap for an additional green, while also having some helpful Planeswalker abilities. Moving on to the next part of the strategy, it's card draw. For repeatable card draw effects, we have Elemental Bond, Garruk's Uprising, and Outcaster Trailblazer, all of which provides card draw when a creature with a certain power level or greater enters under your control. Life's Legacy and Return of the Wild Speaker both provide a one-time card draw effect based around the power of a creature, which works well with this deck because even the tokens you create have 5 power. Lastly, Greater Good is a must-have for this deck because you can net cards by sacrificing elemental tokens while also filling your graveyard with lands so that you can play them later. In my experience, with a big enough board, you can use Greater Good to dig deeper into your deck to find the endgame pieces to help you win the game. Speaking of the endgame, we have some notable pieces that are sure to help you alpha strike your opponents into oblivion. Craterhoof Behemoth and Overwhelming Stampede are game-ending pieces included to make your board even bigger and scarier. Bellowing Tangleworm gives your green creatures Intimidate, not as good as the other 2 cards, but can still help you easily eliminate players without green or artifact blockers. Concordant Crossroads give all creatures haste and is really good, especially when you have a huge turn when you make tens of elementals or millions of Scoot Swarms. You can just win on the spot. Lastly, we have Frenzied Baloth, which is more of a support piece that stops combat damage from being prevented. This one is a flexible slot that's dependent on what your group plays. Moving on to the next part of the strategy, removals and protection spells. There aren't many removal pieces because the build philosophy of this deck is to race to the finish rather than control the board. Beast Within is a standard green removal that I would typically use to remove combo pieces or things that stop you from attacking. Collective Resistance is a removal for artifacts and or enchantments that also acts as a single target protection spell. Sylvan Safekeeper, Tamiel Safekeeping, and Tyvar Stand all serve as single target protection spells, while Heroic Intervention and Smuggler's Surprise are included to protect a wider board. Next up, we have recursion spells. Aftermath Analyst and Splendid Reclamation are both able to return all lands from your graveyard into play, while Eternal Witness is one of the best cards in Magic, allowing you to return any card from your graveyard back to your hand. These spells can be very impactful in the right situations, especially with some of the effects in this deck that fill the graveyard. But they can also be dead cards in the early game, which is why I stuck to only these 3 cards. As always, the final portion of the deck tech is lands. For utility lands, we have Blighted Woodland, which has a similar ability to Myriad Landscape that lets you pay and sacrifice it to put 2 basic lands into play from your library. Fabled Passage is just a better version of Evolving Wilds that lets you fetch for a basic land. It doesn't double up on Titania's ability, but does enhance other landfall triggers. Demolition Field lets you destroy problematic lands while also replacing the land you destroyed and itself with a basic land. Bonder's Enclave lets you pay to draw a card if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, which should be pretty easy to do with this deck. Dryad Arbor is just a non-basic forest that's also a 1/1 creature, while Yavimaya Cradle of Growth turns all lands into a forest in addition to their other types. Because this is a monocolored deck, the rest of the lands are just basic forests, putting the total at 36 lands. In conclusion, I think Titania Nature's Force is a pretty strong commander, and this is definitely one of my favorite monocolor decks. Landfall is such a great mechanic, and with the right cards you can have some pretty crazy games. I've had a lot of games where I went from an average board state to completely overwhelming my opponents. This deck is also one of my more resilient decks. Since it ramps so many lands into play, it's much easier to recover after board wipes or removals. The cost of this deck, according to TCG Player using the cheapest card versions, comes out to be $186. It's certainly not the cheapest deck, but you can easily reduce the cost by cutting some of the pricier cards such as Craterhoof Behemoth, Concordant Crossroads, Ancient Green Warden, and Traveling Chocobo. Now, moving on to Goldfishing. Just like always, I'll be going through the first several turns to give you guys an idea of how I would typically play this deck. Alright, we're here in Moxfield's playtester. Looking at the starting hand, we have 3 lands, 1 piece of ramp. I guess Dryad is kind of like ramp. This hand is okay. Traveling Chocobo is very good, however, it all depends how fast I can get Titania out. Let's just go ahead and start. So for this deck, if you have 2 lands in hand, it's also fine, as long as you have ramp that you can cast. that costs 2 or less. Okay, so first turn I'll play Land or Elves. And then I'll pass my turn and go to turn 2. Oh, okay. I think here I'll just play Yavimaya. Go ahead and tap for 3. That doesn't let me play additional lands, only from the top. So I'm going to play Dryad here. For the Dryad, I'll play an additional land. So Concordant Crossroads, I would not recommend casting this until you have a lethal strike. Because you don't want to help other players out with this. So I usually hold this in my hand until I have a really big turn where I make a bunch of tokens. So we'll go ahead and pass turn 2 and go to turn 3. Question is, should I play that Scoot Swarm? Okay, so I think here I will play. You know what? I'm going to play the Traveling Chocobo first. Just let me look at the top card. So I'll just play with it revealed since it's Goldfishing. Okay, so that's not a land, which is unfortunate. So I will play a forest here and then pass the turn. Okay. Here I am going to play a Bloomvine Regent, at least the Omen side of this. So this will actually go back into the deck and get shuffled. So 1 comes into play tapped, and 1 comes into my hand. Now close and shuffle. Cool. So I shuffled a land on top of the deck, so I'm going to play it. That'll be my first land for turn. And then my second land for turn, I think. Do I want to do that? Yeah, I'll actually play Scoot Swarm first. And then I'll play the second land for turn. I do have 7 lands, so I will get a copy of this. I think Exege's copy. Actually, let's do counters instead. The thing is, it triggers an additional time, so I get a total of 3 of these right now. And then I will pass turn 4 into turn 5. So here I'm going to go ahead and play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 here. I will go ahead and play Titania. Then with her in play, I'm going to play Bonder's Enclave, which is going to be a forest due to Yavimaya, which means I'll create 2 elementals. Set this to 2. And because the land entered, Suit Swarm, it doubles, but then I get an additional trigger, so it's actually 3 times the original amount, which will put it at 9. I do have some mana left. The question is, do I want to keep Traverse the Outworlds up top? Because if I search for a land, that goes away. You know what? That's fine. I'll play Topiary Stomper. It'll come into play. I will search my library for a land and put it into play tapped. Close and shuffle. So this land comes in, I create 2 more of these. Let's just set this to 4. This will triple again, so it'll go to 27. And I can cast my second land for turn, which is going to be a Fabled Passage. Fabled Passage enters, it's a forest, so I get 2 more of these. So that'll be a total of 6. And Suit Swarm triples again. It's going to be 81. And then I can crack the Fabled Passage to grab a forest. It'll come in untapped. So I would get 2 more of these, so 8. And then this triples again, which is 243. That's funny. It doesn't even fit in the little area anymore. And now would be a great time to play Concordant Crossroads, because I believe this is just lethal. Just between the elementals, 8 times 5 is 40 damage, plus 243 damage. Yeah, so at this point I would just attack with my tokens and win, unless someone has a fog somehow. But yeah, that was pretty cool. I think it's a good demonstration of what the deck does. Typically, I do think I got pretty lucky here. Usually it's more of creating elementals and then casting stuff like Overwhelming Stampede or Crater Hoof to win. But here with the Traveling Chocobo and having Concordant Crossroads, I just made a bunch of Scoot Swarms to win. So I think this is a good point to stop. This is a pretty standard demonstration of what the deck does. It just ramps, and then you have cards that make tokens because you ramp, and then you just attack until your opponents are dead, and hopefully you get Concordant Crossroads that let you attack the same turn you make a bunch of tokens. So thanks for watching this goldfishing session. Feel free to leave a comment below if you want, or if you have any suggestions on how I can improve these videos. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.